Hey there, seekers and shapeshifters, healers and expanders. Welcome to the Embodied Spirit Uncensored. I'm Nicole D'Alessandro, and I am here to guide you through an in-depth experience like no other, channeled from higher wisdom through me directly to you. This is a place for those who dare to delve deeper, who crave transformation beyond the conventional, and who are ready to embrace the mystical union of science and spirit. Here at the Embodied Spirit, we don't just scratch the surface, we dive into the very depths of existence. Prepare to be challenged, to change, and to elevate into a new version of yourself. We're inviting you into an entirely new world, a realm that extends far beyond your physical being. So if you're ready to transform your understanding and awaken to your true spirit, you're in the right place. Let's embark on this profound journey together. Welcome to Embodied Spirit, Episode 6, one of my favourite topics. I'm Nicole D'Alessandro, your host. And today, we're going to be exploring the depths of shadow and light. We'll be diving deep into the fascinating interplay of psychology, spirituality, and neuroscience. And we'll be exploring some profound concepts from Carl Jung, C.S. and myself, two great figures whose thoughts bridge metaphysics, science, religion, and mediumship. So first, let me introduce Carl Gustav Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, founded analytical psychology. Jung is renowned for his exploration of the deep aspects of the human psyche, and his concepts of archetypes, the collective unconscious, and notably the shadow. And it's a bit of a buzzword, the shadow, that label or that term in trauma therapy and doing your work. And most of you would have heard of shadow work. And Jung, if you take him in bite-sized pieces, and that's what I'm hoping to do today, there's some really rich, beautiful underpinnings with his work in how we can access those shadow parts of ourselves, those deep repressed unconscious aspects. But before we go into him, let me also introduce C.S. Lewis, or Clive Staples Lewis, more popularly known as the famous author of Chronicles of Narnia series, and he subtly weaves religious, moral, and philosophical elements through his stories. Two great people in this field of psychology and spirituality. And C.S. Lewis was also known for his works on Christian apologetics, which is a branch of Christian theology that defends Christianity against objections. And his work is mainly focused on making moral decisions. And you'll know that if you have read or watched the Chronicles of Narnia, very much about the shadow and the light, making decisions between light and darkness. And this theme is central to both metaphysical inquiries and everyday moral decisions. So let's come back to a little bit about the shadow in Jung's idea. And he refers to the shadow as the parts of ourselves that we repress or deny, often containing the less socially acceptable parts of our personality, such as impulses, desires, and emotions. They can be quite confronting, I want to say. Most of my clients, most of you, are afraid to go looking into the lurky shadows of that which you don't know about. Those parts of you that have been programmed in your earlier life, whether it be through a teacher, whether it be through culture, policy, whether you be polarizing or splitting certain aspects of self because someone looked at you the wrong way. So most of us want to hide those parts of ourselves. For myself, rather than consider them to be unwanted or less socially acceptable, I prefer to call the shadow as misunderstandings. We misunderstand them and therefore we split them or we polarize them into parts that are good and parts that are bad. But I want to really highlight that it's like falling asleep and waking up and you freak out because you see a shape on your wall or you see your clothes hanging on a hanger and you automatically think it's the boogie monster. And you're pleasantly surprised when you turn on the light. The shadow and shadow work can often be pleasant because when you go into and shine a torch or bring those unconscious parts to conscious awareness, there's a sense of relief. It's a beautiful freeing moment when you can acknowledge that those maybe once upon a time programmings told you that they were unwanted or unreasonable or not acceptable, actually created a sense of resilience, a sense of power. Maybe you're really organised, and those unwanted shadow parts are what formed that level of organisational structure. So rather than go off on tangents, let me come back to exploring these connections between Jungian philosophy, spiritual experiences, and neuroscience. What we get to do is encounter a rich tapestry of ideas that can profoundly inform our understanding of human behaviour and transformation. And this concept of the shadow, combined with spiritual encounters, such as one might experience in mediumship or for me in psychic capacity, what it develops is this understanding of universal frequency, or the energies that we don't always know about, that are there. We know they're there, but we can't always see or measure or access or understand them. And therefore it's cast out as being voodoo or non-existent or scary. When people that aren't familiar with psychic mediumship or developing their psychic awareness, and yes, everyone is psychic, we tend to steer away from that because it's almost like the shadowy parts. We don't know, or we don't really understand the magnitude of tapping into that potential. So for me, my work, a lot of my work with clients is around acknowledging and integrating the shadow, because I believe it is pivotal for achieving wholeness. And so does C.S. Lewis and Carl Jung. And in terms of neuroscience, the shadow can be seen as those aspects of ourselves that are not fully conscious but still influence our behaviours and our emotional reactions. And most of our conscious behaviour, the way in which we go about our day, is relative or functioned by our unconscious material. So it makes absolutely no sense as to why we wouldn't be doing shadow work. Because if you know that your behaviours, the way in which you operate in your day-to-day life is predominantly a function of the unconscious shadow material, then why the fuck wouldn't you be going with a torch, going looking for all the diamonds in the roughs and all the little hidden aspects of self? Because that's where behaviour changes. That's where habits change. That's where we can create whatever it is through a manifesting lens. So these neural correlates associated with repressed or ignored emotions and memories can be seen as neural correlates to what Jung might describe as the shadow, like I've just said. And when these pathways are activated, either by external events or internal shifts, they trigger reactions that might seem out of character. But they're deeply rooted in the unacknowledged parts of the brain. And the brain likes rationale. The brain likes to sense make or try to make sense. The paradox or the contradiction is nothing really makes sense, right? But that's why this work is so important, is because that can actually change the way in which the brain is motivated. So many of us protect or avoid the shadow. We know this. We've just spoken about it. And this is where we tend to struggle in relationships. This is where our vulnerable parts get hidden. And we tend to have surface level conversations. We don't want to seem overly emotional. We don't understand our emotions because it's not consciously in our awareness, and it keeps us from being intimate with others. And so in the realm of spirit and mediumship, again, these experiences with lower vibration or entities can be interpreted through a variety of psychological, spiritual, and neuroscientific lenses. So from a Jungian perspective, when I work with, say, the psychic medium world, or I'm channeling and I've encountered darker spirits, and I have worked quite closely with shadow spirits in my past through my rage, because my frequency was at a lower vibration, and I've already talked to you about that frequency or vibration, and the law of attraction attracts another frequency and vibration. Well, this can also happen when you're in your shadow parts or you're distracted by the shade or darkness and those unwanted parts. We tend to encounter the darker spirits. And what Jung says about this is that it can symbolize the shadowy parts or the mediumistic energies that a medium or a psychic might encounter. What Jung's saying is that it could be a symbolized version or an engagement with one's own shadow through the lens of another. So meeting the parts of oneself that are associated with destruction, temptation, and the morally questionable, it can also be related to the law of one and many. And the law of one and many for me, and I will go into that on another episode, but it relates to that which is in you is in me, and that which is basically within the whole universal frequency of wholeness is in each and every one of us. Might sound like a contradiction, but when we are working with entities and energies, in essence, we're working with self, because as a whole, universal oneness, we are the universe, but in part. So rather than go off on that tangent, because I will get lost and I could talk about this with you for hours, but you might get lost too, and I don't want that for you. So in C.S. Lewis's work, he often explores the theme of choosing between goodness, God, or constructive paths, and darkness, often linked to evil, destruction, or morally dubious choices. And it will depend on your belief systems, your faith, whether you're religious. And that's what's great about Jungian psychology and C.S. Lewis is Lewis is probably more around religion, but Jung more around the psychology. And so this choice can be paralleled in how we deal with our shadow. So for me, when I was in rage and I was distracted by those darker parts of self, there was a tendency for me to work with other shadows, work with other entities and energies that were of a lower frequency vibration, hang out with people. You see that when you are hanging out or when you're in a low frequency and you're making immoral choices, you tend to hang out with people that are similar in that frequency. And that's what basically this is saying from C.S. Lewis's perspective, that if you're working in the shadows or even the satanic cults and those sorts of energies that are being distracted by darker forces and making immoral choices, you can see how it interlinks between the psychic, metaphysical, spiritual, mediumship, and then the physical realms. So embracing and integrating our shadow aspects in a constructive manner can lead to personal growth and fulfillment, which also means from a mediumistic or a spiritual perspective, then we start to elevate our consciousness. We start to bring unconscious material to the conscious. We start to understand that maybe we've been lured into the shadow in working with entities and energies and believing that they are good because it's distracting, probably a little bit like Lucifer on the television show or that series. I also like to sort of relate the darker energies to Drop Dead Fred, if you've ever watched that. It's about a young girl going through some really traumatic experiences with her mum and her dad splitting up and all sorts of scenarios. And she has this imaginary friend and he lures her into all sorts of mischievous encounters. So for me, that's how I would explain working in the darker, distracting energies, not necessarily always so evil, can be, particularly when we've got personality disorders and things like that. But more specifically, working or lurking in the shadow is quite distracting to us elevating and experiencing joy and fulfillment in life. So by integrating and moving through these experiences of spirit and mediumship and insights from the neuroscience, there's a holistic understanding of our inner workings. And we aren't just a body. We aren't just a mind. We are energy. In fact, we are more energy than we are matter. So doesn't it make sense that you go and explore body, mind, and spirit integration, and even through the lens of the shadow, that you consider those psychic capacities, the intuitive senses, not necessarily have to go down the mediumship path, but just become curious about understanding these dynamics so that you can better navigate your path towards, healing. I don't really like the word because that implies that you need fixing, but like a bit of a wound, tending to those parts of self that maybe you're trying to hide. maybe the facade that you're putting on in society, or the lies that you tell the people that you love that cast more shadow onto you. If you look at those and you integrate them and you come from an understanding of what you're programming in your earlier life and how it contributed to this, then you will feel more whole and you'll be able to make more conscious choices that align closely with the lighter, constructive energies. And that gives you the capacity and the strength and the wisdom to acknowledge and manage the darker aspects of your psyche. And really, exploring these themes not only enriches your understanding of human psychology and spiritual experiences, but it also empowers us to live more fully integrated lives where every aspect of our being is acknowledged. And when you're accused of something and you can say, yep, I've brought all those parts to the surface. I love them. I understand them. I know where they come from. I get why I made those choices. I get why I did that. Then there's a fucking power in that. And you can see that I've witnessed it over almost 3 decades of working in community. It is a really beautiful place to be when you can fully acknowledge all parts, and we're infinite. So another contradiction, every time you think you peel back another layer, there's another fucking layer. I love that. I always ask, how many layers do you peel back an onion before it's ready to be cut up and cooked? I guess with yourself, how many layers do we peel back before we can actually fully understand all parts of self? Well, we're infinite. So I don't know that that's ever going to be something that we can do. So how do these ideas resonate, and Jung's ideas resonate with the concept of embodiment and the pursuit of understanding one's own inner divinity? And I might sound like I'm repeating myself, but embodiment is all about repetition. This dialogue is particularly relevant in today's world, where traditional structures and beliefs are often questioned or have lost their immediate impact on individuals. Even that term, shadow, do your work. It's loosely thrown around and most people, quite frankly, get fucking sick of hearing it. Or they cast out the shadowy therapist or the shadowy coach that hasn't done any work on their unconscious or brought to light, or is still in judgment or lopsided in their perception. People tend to think that this work is shit because of those judgments. So the dialogue is, like we said, particularly relevant, and they've lost their immediate impact. And Jung famously, I love this quote that he says, he famously suggested that modern individuals for whom traditional religious images and gods no longer hold the same power, whom he referred to as living in a time for whom all gods are dead, must turn inward to find spiritual fulfillment. He believed that the forces within, those parts of our unconscious that we might typically ignore or repress, hold the key to resolving our spiritual dilemmas. What does this mean in plain English? For me, when we talk about we've lost our immediate impact, that all gods are dead, that we turn outwards, we praise or we place emphasis on gods and images and symbols that are outside of our own expression. How about we find the God within? We create a beautiful, harmonious relationship with those parts of self that are innate, that are wise, that are beyond this capacity for a brain to understand, rather than look out and seek information. And let me be clear, when you work with coaches and therapists and support systems, they aren't the gurus. They aren't the experts. You are. What a therapist or a coach or a healer or someone who you have embarked on as a mentor or to gain knowledge from is simply to walk beside you, to shine a torch, to give you a bag of tools, a shed of tools to use so that it facilitates your unraveling, so that you can gain access to the parts of self that you might not know. It's like going on an expedition or hiking. If you take me into the fucking hills, I need an orienteer. I take my girlfriend because I know the hills. I've been there a few times in our local community. But if I go walking in the bush, I'm not coming back because I don't fucking know my way. I'm shit at reading maps and I need someone to help me read a map. That is the idea of working with supportive systems. They help you navigate your map so that you can have access to the wisdoms within. Long explanation, right? So Jung observed that as society has become more secularized and rationalized, the traditional symbols and narratives that once provided a sense of purpose and understanding of the world have become less effective. So for many, the religious symbols no longer resonate as they once did, leaving a void where meaning, morality, and purpose were once found. So in the absence of these traditional guides, Jung posited that individuals must now look inward to find this meaning and spiritual fulfillment. So if you haven't already got it through this last 20 bloody minutes, this inward turn is not just about introspection, but involves engaging with the unconscious mind, a vast and often unexplained or unexplored territory within everyone. And I was speaking to a young teen the other day around finding the breath, and he actually said to me, what does that actually mean? It means turning in. So if you take anything from today's episode, go and fucking sit with yourself. Close your eyes. Why do we close our eyes? Because once we remove a sense, particularly sight, then we actually have to engage with other senses. And we engage with our intuitive side, our psychic side. And that's where you get to look in. So this is where, again, the practice of embodiment comes into play. Embodiment is not just about being present in our bodies, but about integrating all aspects of our being, mind, body, and spirit. It's about acknowledging and embracing the entirety of our experiences and selves, which includes those shadow aspects Jung spoke about. In my practice, I often encounter individuals seeking psychic readings and direct answers from beyond or from spirit world or from family members or ancestors, or they want all the fun stuff. And consistent with Jung's perspective, my approach isn't to provide readings in the traditional sense. I say no, I don't actually do readings, even though I'm a psychic medium. I don't do any of that because I want to inspire and teach my clients and facilitate their own change and how they can connect with and embody their own divine essence, their godness within. And this shift from seeking external validation to nurturing internal exploration is a powerful step towards spiritual autonomy and empowerment. Now, does that mean I don't channel or I don't get access to insights and wisdoms and I don't feed that on to my clients? No, that's not what that means. But my mission and my underpinning, my integrity lies in the fact that you can access that material, and I would much rather teach you and impart that wisdom and mentor you and give you access to the tools so that you can embody those wisdoms, because that's where longevity resides too. And Jung's idea of looking within, Francis, encourages us to engage deeply within our inner worlds. It challenges us to confront our shadows, those parts of self that we might be uncomfortable with or previously ignored. And by doing so, we can start to grow and heal and access the vast reservoir of wisdom that lies within each of us. And this process is what allows us to truly embody our spirituality, not just conceptualize it. And those spiritual narcissists, I've been called one before. I had to go and actually sit with that because I am quite opinionated. I have a very deep passion for the work that I do. So we all have those parts in us, right? I've also been told I'm bipolar because I speak to dead people and I work with shadowy parts. And, I have been known to be batshit crazy, and I welcome all those parts in, and I've taken a nice deep look into those qualities of self and learnt how to love them and shine light on them and bring them into a moral understanding so that I can function from a place of integrity. If I was to disown those parts, or if I was to disown the judgment that somebody had said about those parts, then they would stay in the shadows and I'd bury them, and I'd probably create other defenses, which would then lead me more into the frustration, judgment, and denial parts. So I hope this is making sense, but conceptualization and embodiment are very different things. Walking the walk and talking the talk are two different aspects of spirituality and embodiment. Talking is not action, and that can't be embodiment. You can't embody just languaging. So when I, again, work with individuals, my goal is to guide them into this deep personal exploration, and I encourage them, you, to not just seek signs or messages, but to cultivate a relationship with your inner self that is as real and dynamic as any relationship you might seek with external deities or spirits. Your relationship to yourself is paramount, has to come first. And I've spent a lot of my life seeking external deities and spirits. And like I said in earlier episodes, not always for the right reasons. A lot of the time it was to rebel, to disembody, to stir up chaos. And this adventure for outside of myself led me to encounter darker energies, which I will speak to later down the track. And when we're disassociated or out of our bodies or in our heads, what happens is we miss the cues viscerally. We tend to not be able to feel the guts of the matter. And those gutsy embodied essences tell us that we might be off task or not operating from good intentions. And this is where I contradict myself, because there is a place for disembodiment and entertaining darker energies and working with those, lurky forces. Because often when we experience adverse childhood experiences or there is a traumatic event experience in adulthood, lurking in the shadows can be a haven for survival, meaning it does have its place. And there are many blessings that come with delving deeper into not only understanding our shadow, but also the darker energies that come to distract us, because there cannot be light without shade. However, when hanging out with darker forces or refusing to embrace the shadow parts of self, we can often become lost. We tend to project our unwanted parts. And this is where some personality disorders come into play. The mind splits itself. It creates very sophisticated defenses for survival. And it can lead us into ego, not our soul. So when we do integrate and become very aware of those hidden parts, we transform. We become not just believers in the divine, but living embodiments of it. This transformation is not about discarding the mystical or the spiritual, but about recognizing that these elements are deeply woven into the fabric of our being, accessible not through mediums or intercessors, but through our own courageous journey inward. Fuck, that was a mouthful. I'm just getting excited, but I'm going to leave you with that today. So as we wrap up our episode, consider how you might start or continue this journey towards embodying your own divine essence. Remember, the most profound mysteries and the most powerful deities reside not in the external world, but within the vast landscapes of our own souls. Until next time, keep exploring, keep feeling, and keep embodying your truth. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for joining us on The Embodied Spirit Uncensored. Today's journey may have ended, but your personal transformation has only just begun. So keep channeling the insights and energies from our episode. And as you move forward, remember, this podcast is for those who are not just living, but are seeking to live profoundly. Continue to explore, expand and evolve with us. Make sure to follow this series, connect with us on Instagram at Nicole D'Alessandro Perth, or visit www.nicoledalessandro.com.au for more transformative content. You can also find me on Facebook at Nicole D'Alessandro. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and more importantly, stay batshit crazy as you embody and explore beyond your current realm of existence. I'll see you later for now, and remember, this journey to embodying your spirit is the most significant journey you'll ever undertake.